Data,
empathy,
resilience,
systems,
innovation,
ecosystem,
legacy.
commons.
Welcome to this episode of Sustainability Karma. I'm your host Naina Gautam, and today we have with us Prateek Raj. He's an associate professor of business management and health sciences at University College London in the UCL Global Business School for Health. He's the author of the book Atypical: 5 Strategy Rules for a New World, which explores how businesses can pursue sustainable business strategies for solving the grand challenges of our times. Previously, he served as an assistant professor of strategy at IIM Bangalore, founding the Inclusive Markets Lab. Welcome, Prateek, to this edition of Sustainability Karma.
Thanks, Nana. Glad to be here.
You have written a book titled Atypical: 5 Strategy Rules for a New World. What is atypical testing in simple terms?
So, atypical testing is one of the key methods that came out in the book, which I think now, when I speak about the book, quite often it is one of the most useful things that I can share with people. So, the idea of atypical testing is very simple, that we should not be salesmen in our business at all times. We should also be scientists in when we think about our business. And being a scientist is often about trying to work with stakeholders, speaking to people who would not agree with us. Being a scientist, what does a scientist do? A scientist tries to run towards evidence which is going to falsify their hypothesis. They're not running towards evidence which is going to confirm their hypothesis. So, taking a cue from that idea, the idea of atypical testing is that you look for stakeholders, you look for people who can actually give you useful critical feedback. And you're looking for people who you are usually not keen to speak to, or whom you may find inconvenient to speak to, people who are marginalized, people whom you may not think very highly about. But speaking to these people can be very helpful because they can give you feedback about your business, about your organization, about its processes, the products, which is actually quite helpful. So that's the overall idea of atypical testing, which is go out and speak to atypical people.
How is it related to the broader concept of sustainability?
Very, very related to the broader concept of sustainability, because a big challenge of sustainability is that sometimes we do not even know what is the pollutant or what is the negative harm that is happening of a product. Example is global warming itself, that we never thought of CO2 as a big pollutant until 20, 30 years ago. What happened is that atypical people at the fringes, were often the first people who started to say, there's something problematic. People who live in slum areas, people who are more likely to be exposed to these, they're much more likely to then come up and say, look, this is a problem. And society typically ignores them for a long time because, people who are consuming, disposable waste, for example, they could be they may throw it away and the waste goes somewhere else. They don't see it. So this is where atypicals become very important. Are the first people who learn about the pollutants and their ill effects. So basically, atypical testing is essential when we think about sustainability.
What do you mean by early detection of harm?
So early detection of harm is a very simple idea that if you speak to atypical people, then they are going to tell you the ill effects of your processes or your products early on. And if you ignore them, then basically you will not hear about it. And sooner or later, one day when a big crisis comes up, that's when you learn about it. And you can apply this concept in any situation. Think about deforestation for that matter. It's usually people who are locals, who are forest dwellers, people who are inhabitants of an area, slum dwellers, people who use banks of a river to bathe. Those are the people who are the first people who will tell you if the environment is degrading or if there's any issue in place, right? So atypical folks, atypical stakeholders are often the first people. And a big question today is that what is it today that we are doing which we do not know is harmful, but it is harmful? And if we want to know what is today harmful that we are not knowing yet, we should go and listen to atypical stakeholders and they will tell us. For example, one of the things that is potentially harmful and we are learning quickly is social media for adolescents. So when very, very young teenagers use social media, it leaves them with some negative effects. We are still debating it, but maybe 30 years down the line, it will be a well-established fact that below a certain age, people should not be given exposure to a lot of social media. So that's, and how do we know about it? If we hear stories, the more stories we hear about it, the more we learn about it.
Why focus on people often called outliers?
For a variety of reasons. One of which is from a simple statistical perspective, outliers are often kind of set aside as these are not the average, this is not the norm. But the thing is that people who are outsiders or data which is an outsider, yes, there's one, it's they are not average, and that's okay. But this why is something an outsider? What is their unique experience? You can learn a lot by dealing in depth with these outsiders. So, first of all, it's a mindset change that instead of thinking of outsiders or as outliers, as people we can ignore because they're outliers, they're anecdotal. In fact, it is the other way around. The more outlier an anecdote is, the more interesting you should be, more interested you should become about it. That's one thing. So one is just the data generation process and how it creates this bias against outliers to some extent. The second is the problem that outliers tend to often be people who are powerless, and there's no incentive to hear them, really. So this is the power logic. One was the data logic, this is the power logic, that often we just don't listen to people who we can ignore, right? That's again a place where it's important for us to think about outliers, especially marginalized outliers, and bring them in our decision making, in our data collection, in our thinking, in our concerns and consideration. And then there's a third thing, which is when we design surveys, for example, a survey design is not an objective thing. We choose certain questions and we not choose certain questions depending on, because we have only, we are interviewing right now, we have limited amount of time, you talk me limited set of questions. Now what questions you choose and what questions you don't choose is a subjective decision to a large extent, and so is true with any kind of data collection that we do. And once again, in a typical data collection, we take typical questions because we want to cover a large breadth of things. And that's again when we have come across outliers, we can use their knowledge and understanding to understand outlier concerns, things that we may not have thought about, concepts we may not have given much salience to, etc., etc.
What are some limits of data-driven decision making?
So one of the big limits of data-driven decision making is, think about GDP actually. If we just use GDP as a measure of progress, then environmental harm would never be considered fully, right? So data is not a bad thing at all, right? But data becomes counterproductive when we start to become obsessed over data, and we don't realize that while data does tell us trends, the average trends about something, it also ignores a lot of things if we don't collect that kind of data. So for example, when we think about economic growth, if we just change our measurement of economic growth from some sort of GDP output to thinking about quality of life and how often are you able to have clean water, for example, or clean air, then the metrics would change completely, right? Now, of course, one can say we can have data on that, right? But the challenge is that only when you talk to people especially talk to people who are more affected by something. So, for example, think about air pollution. Now, for a lot of people, air pollution is okay in the sense that they they're living in a big city, which gives them good opportunities. They get good jobs, and yes, there is some air pollution, and they are okay with it in the sense that there's livelihood, which is also important. So that's why they may be okay. However, think about people um, who live near more polluted areas, in industrial areas. So all those people have a very different understanding of pollution, and they would not take it so lightly, and they would want all our decisions to involve, pollution related information when we think about growth and development. So that's where, even to understand what data to collect, we need to speak to outliers, and we need to speak to atypical stakeholders, so that we need to do atypical testing. So one of the key things that I talk about in the book is the fact that we cannot be too quantitative, and we cannot be too qualitative, and we cannot be too focused on only the typical stakeholders or too focused on just the atypical stakeholders. We have to think about the two groups in tandem. So we are collecting data, but we are also talking to atypical stakeholders, thinking about their experiences, understanding, is there any data that I need to collect more actually, and then you incorporate that in your data setting. So it's really not that data is deceptive, it's just that when we collect data while speaking to atypical stakeholders as well, we just have a much better data generation process.
What does immersive listening really mean?
So immersive listening is very natural way, or it's a natural complement to data collection. So data collection is about surveys, right? It's about collecting data about information, income, consumption, etc. Immersive listening is really about immersively speaking to someone and listening to someone and their experiences, because there are many aspects of life which cannot be measured in data. For example, dignity, and for example, sense of respect. And if you do not listen immersively to people, then what's going to happen is that you will, a lot of times people care about dignity and respect a lot more than basic materialist things. Data can measure the materialist things a lot, but it is not capable of fully collecting information on these aspects, the emotional aspects of life. And that's where I think it becomes so important to do immersive listening. And the reason why immersive listening is so important is because we listen, yes, but what often happens is when we listen to people, we are listening them with our own processes and with our own biases, and we are listening them from our perspective. And that is not good enough. Immersive listening is about really seeing the world of this other person from their lens, and listening to somebody in a non-judgmental way, which basically means that you may disagree with somebody, or you may not approve of somebody. When you're listening, you're just listening, and you are then bringing in your biases and judgments, while immersive listening is trying to understand where are they coming from, and even if you do not agree with them, why do they say what they say, what is driving this. So listening deeply and listening from their perspective helps you then get a better understanding of the mental mindset, of the life circumstances of somebody else. So that's why immersive listening is a very valuable and powerful tool for understanding.
How can empathy strengthen strategy?
Basically, immersive listening is essentially a very simple way, or a simple skill, which is directly linked to empathy. And it links to strategy in the sense that when you have the ability of immersive listening, when you have the ability to see the world from the perspectives of your various stakeholders, you are able to just be a better decision maker, because you have more knowledge now. You have more capacity for information because you have collected your data, you've done your trend analysis and all the quantitative stuff, but you've also spoken to people of various types, of various stakeholders. And this essentially means that you have more information and hence you can make better decisions. And that's how strategy becomes much more effective. Of course, there's a problem of time. How much time do you have to really give to this? And that's where the question comes up that as a leader, you should definitely have the skill of immersive listening and empathy. But at the same time, you need to build a culture in your organization that everybody is actually engaging in this.
How can this approach help in sustainability or climate work?
So, as I mentioned, so all firms have externalities. All organizations have pollutants. And understanding what, and all organizations also have positive externalities, by the way, they create positive change. So the really important thing is when you speak to various stakeholders, atypical stakeholders, you understand the broader footprint of your work and you understand the broader positive footprint and negative footprint of your work. So it is directly related. And that's exactly what the book is about, that when you speak to atypical stakeholders, not just stakeholders, you are collecting information, you just develop a natural, better understanding of the footprint you're making as an organization. And just by knowing this, you can transformatively then become a better organization because you just know what are your footprints and reduce the footprint of things that doesn't work and increase the footprint of things that works.
In a tech-driven world, how do we keep the human element alive?
Very interesting question. And I actually do not see any dichotomy there, actually. In fact, interestingly, in my view, once we are going to have more and more AI adoption, it is these soft skills like empathy, immersive listening, design thinking, which is actually going to become more important in the job market, actually. So I think that there's no need to think of it as a dichotomy, because very realistically, people who would naturally have softer skills, they will naturally do better. If you're a better communicator, you will do better you will get better jobs. So people will then, parents would push their kids less to do math and push them more to learn writing and literature, actually. So different kind of a world, but tech has brought more soft skills in the world as a consequence.
And before ending the interview, we do a segment called Green Sprint. It's short and snappy. So are you ready for it? Sustainability.
Karma.
Data.
Empathy.
Resilience.
Systems.
Innovation.
Ecosystem.
Legacy.
Commons.
Love those answers, short but full of meaning. Thank you again, Prateek, for being with us.
Thank you, Naina, for your time.
This is Naina Gautam signing off for Sustainability Karma.
We hope you like this program. We look forward to your feedback on our WhatsApp number 9818120554. For participation in this program, write to us at sustainability.karma@gmail.com. Looking forward to meet you again at the same time next week with a new episode and a new guest. Till then, goodbye from all of us. Sustainability Karma.